Hey,
Hey, what's up, Marty?
how you doing, Andrew? What's happening?
First and foremost, as we know, recently there was some misconstruement of your comments on solos. So, first and foremost, in the state of the modern solo, to clarify what you meant, um, can you clarify those comments? I guess just so we understand where you were coming from.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how what I said before got turned into whatever got printed, but regardless, I will say, give you my opinion on solos as clear as I possibly can. Solos are the most fun, expressive, or one of the most expressive parts of playing any instrument. And I think it's everyone's responsibility to try to have their own voice and their own particular way of expressing themselves when they play solos. And since solos have been around since forever, um, there's got to be new ways to interpret the existence of a solo. Um, for the longest time, the solo guitar solo came right after the second chorus of any pop song. In the 50s, it was sax solos. In the 60s, it started to be these twangy electric solos. And then the 70s, it was like these distorted guitar solos, but they all kind of came in the same place of the song. They all lasted around the same amount of time. And it was basically just a break from when people were singing, you sing for a while and then you give a little guitar solo and then you move on in the song, which is wonderful to that end. But thankfully, music has grown and become a lot more adventurous over the years, and I think it's every artist, every musician's kind of a quest to find an interesting way to bring people into listening to whatever solo it is you're going to play. So whether that be putting it in a different part of the song or making it an unusual length or playing something that is completely unrelated to any other part of the song or conversely completely related to something in the song like following a snare pattern or following a vocal melody or any kind of tag that you can bring your own artistic sense to whatever it is you're playing as the soloist is going to be one step further than just your obligatory 8-bar solo, which happens a lot. So this has been a constant quest in my career, probably since I was a teen. I always thought, why does the solo have to be here? Or why does the solo have to be in the same key as the part that was before it? And why does it have to end in this key? And every single thing has always been a question. And how can I do something with this slab of music that hasn't been done before? So when I do play whatever solo it is I play, it kind of stands out. A lot of times the content of the solo is one thing, but how it hits you, where it hits you, in what context it hits you is much more, gives you much more bang for the buck, so to speak. And the king of doing this is Brian May. His solos come in very, very unusual places, and they're always um, attention grabbing, and the content is often, it's very nice content, but it's not the most flashy. It's not the most difficult. It's not the most trendy techniques or any of that stuff. It's just the care that went into putting it where it is and the care to choosing the content that has some meaning to something prior to it or some meaning to something after it. These are all things that, given a little thought, will extend the life of solos in pop and rock music. And if that's not a long run-on sentence, I don't know what is.
Yeah, obviously, you're somebody that plays guitar solos for a living. It's a big part of what you do, and you obviously wouldn't want to do away with them entirely. And my perception of of your comments, and I guess the way I took it, and the way I would hope a lot of people took it, was that when, especially when you talk about traditional, it's not that solos would die or go away forever, but more so that they be inventive, that people push the envelope, that people do new things with it rather than stagnate. Is that sort of kind of where you were going with it? Because obviously, again, I don't. My perception was not that it was a negative, that guitar solos should go away and be dead forever.
Oh, absolutely. I would never say anything like that. Um, um, you're spot on. I mean, I think I would prefer a song with no solo rather than a solo that's just there for the obligation of putting a solo in there. And I think that, what's the word in English? Phenomenon of just putting a flashy solo in the middle of a song, I think that might be something that turns off a lot of people, mainstream music listeners, and that's the type of thing that makes people think that the guitar solo in general is kind of a dated concept. And it really is. I mean, it's been around for quite a long time. I mean, like I said before, in the 50s, almost all the songs had sax solos in them. And then came a time where guitar solos became a little bit more in vogue. And who knows when the guitar solos lifespan is going to run out, you know what I mean? So for us in the world of making music with guitar, I think it would behoove all of us to try to really be clever about what we're doing with not only guitar solos but guitar parts in general. There was a group called Garbage in the mid 90s that probably extended the life of guitar decades with their inventive ways of presenting guitar and guitar harmonies and guitar lines within the context of interesting modern pop music that made guitar cool for a lot of people who normally just thought guitar was something that you stick a flashy solo in the middle of the song about. So there's endless ways. Guitar is just another instrument. There's endless ways to be creative with it. And I think, if you're just going to do something that's been done a million times over again, I would prefer no solo in a song to a solo that's just an obligation. Um, I never thought the Ramones needed any guitar solos. And, it's one of those things. An obligation is not really the greatest artistic statement, So if you're going to make the statement of putting a guitar, a little guitar symphony inside of a song, it's wonderful if you can do something that maybe comes from a different angle than what people are used to hearing and maybe surprises them. Maybe the song starts off with a guitar solo. Hey, have you heard that song that actually starts off with a guitar solo? I've never heard anything like that. Just any kind of simple angle, different angle. And then, of course, your content, the more unique your content is, the better. But you know what I'm saying. Let's be creative here. I think everyone has a completely different set of influences and a different set of life experiences that influence what comes out of their instruments. So the more interesting that is, the more people are going to enjoy the instrument of guitar for more years to come.
And one of the things that cropped up too in the recent piece on with you was self-indulgence. And again, I think my perception of that was not a negative thing, but sort of maybe indulging your deepest fantasies as a guitarist rather than being self-indulgent to be flashy, or you know uh, you know what I mean. I guess, to clarify, what are your thoughts on self-indulgence as a guitar player, specifically with regards to solos, and how you look at its place in the whole shebang?
I think every single person who creates music for people to listen to has the distinct responsibility of making sure that every single thing they play represents their art, represents that person. So if that person's art is playing something that might seem self-indulgent to people, more power to them. You know, each person is their own complete entity, and I would never even dream of saying you should do this or you should do that or that's self-indulgent, so it sucks. I would never say that. Um, you know, being an artist is self-indulgent. You have to be true to the music that you want people to hear that says your name on it. So when your name comes up, this particular image of music comes to that person's mind. And self-indulgent is just like that's a term that a listener might say when he hears something that just sounds like there wasn't too much thought in it. Maybe there was just a lot of something that they had practiced. You know, I always say that when you listen to someone playing melodies or playing solos, you can hear that person's life. You know, so a lot of times if you hear something that um, sounds really, really technically difficult and fancy and flashy, you can almost see that guy practicing in his bedroom with a metronome for hours and hours on end and not leaving the room. And that image is a very true image, but I think as a person who's a fan of music and a fan of art, maybe a more colorful and interesting and emotional image might be more appealing for me as a listener than, wow, this guy spent a lot of hours in front of a metronome. You know what I mean? I like to feel, as myself anyway, as a fan, I like to see an interesting life come out of those notes and not just the result of working hard and practicing. Because, well, I could get into a really deep concept on this. I mean, I don't know how many hours you have on this, but I think there's three ways to separate all of us as players of music. And they're all good and they're all very necessary. But hear me out.
I'm here
There's
for it.
players. You hear? There's players. There's players, all right? Guy can play the instrument very, very well, versatile, can play a lot of different styles, can hang in a lot of different musical contexts. When you hear him play, you're like, wow, this guy can play. Fantastic thing. That's players. And then there's musicians. And a musician can play, but this musician, what he has over the players is he understands the entire piece of music from the ground up. So he can create, let's say, for example, a backing track to play over. He can create a full song from the bottom up, whether that means programming drums himself or some kind of a rhythm sequencer or hiring a person to play drums and having writing out a part for a drummer, or he can put the rhythm together, he can put the low end bass or whatever instrument it is together, and he can understand the complete concepts of building a piece of music from the beginning to the end. That's a musician. Then there's an artist. The artist is someone whose sole purpose is to find the music that represents that person and get that music to the listener whatever way he can. And this has very little to do with developing techniques or getting better at your instrument. What this has to do with is how strong is this person's artistic vision that it's a must that he gets that exact sound out to the people who are listening to it. Whatever you hear coming from that artist, that's exactly how he wants to be represented. So it takes a very particular skill set for an artist to make all of the musical choices that, as a sum, that's him in a musical context. When you hear that music, you're hearing that person. Just like in a painter, you know, if you see a Van Gogh painting, you know he did it. Why do you know he did it? Because he made different decisions than, for example, a Rembrandt did, who made different decisions. And those decisions are all very characteristic of that particular artist. The same exact thing goes with playing guitar or any other interpretive instrument, especially when it comes to improvising and creating your own melodies and creating a product. Creating a product, that product has to have something that separates it from another product, or else you wouldn't know which product that you're choosing. And these are all very artistic decisions. So there you have the player, you have the musician, and you have the artist. And they all are very important and very necessary, but they're not mutually exclusive, meaning that just because someone can play has absolutely no bearing on whether they're an artist or not. There are guys, and I remember, and this is something that readers should know because as a kid, we all gone through this. You've gone to somebody's basement and it's like, there's a dude on the block who can play everything. He can play every solo I've ever heard, put on the radio. He can copy it. This is a player. And it's a huge person of admiration and inspiration, especially when you're a beginner, because when you see a guy doing something that you can't do on the same friggin' instrument, it's like really burns you up. So for the first several years of your guitar journey, these guys who can play everything, difficult things, crazy things, things of different genres, these guys are like superstars to like young beginners who are just gathering knowledge and they just want to get better on the instrument. But these are the players. And a lot of that time playing and developing the ability to play like everybody else is kind of shaving off the time that could have been spent deciding how you really want to represent your own music. And I dare say it's a slight bit lazy. It's probably easier to learn a bunch of other people's techniques, learn a bunch of other people's music, and practice like a madman and get it done and impress people with that. It's probably easier to do that than to commit to the things that define your own personal style and put those out on display to be rejected or to be liked or to just be passed on or to make big success with. Um, so these are the differences between players and artists. And I think a lot of young guitarists think you ask them what your goal is, and I just want to get better at guitar. And as someone who's been in music my entire life, I'm here to tell you that there's not a whole lot of risk involved in that. All you have to do is go home and practice. There's practice tools for free everywhere. But when are you going to put yourself on display? When are you going to really decide which notes are the ones that represent you? Which touch represents you? Which look represents you? Which people do you want to be associated with when you put some music out? Because no one does it by themselves. It's always a group of people. How are you going to choose these people? So becoming an artist and putting out a product is infinitely more personal and more challenging than the things that look impressive with fingers flying and things like that. Oftentimes, people develop from one thing to another. You start as a player, and then you're a musician, then you're an artist, and all those type of things happen. But I think it's very important for people to recognize as early as possible that whatever your goal is, you should try to get to that. You know what I mean? It's like when I was a kid, I wanted to be playing my music on stage in a cool band. I wanted to be playing music that I loved playing. And to that end, I made every single musical decision, every single personal decision, every single career decision. All those decisions were towards that end. And during the course of that, I developed my musical, whatever abilities I have, I developed that. But I think where a lot of young guitar players could learn is I think a lot of young people think if I develop this fantastic technique, like I just saw on Instagram, everything's just going to happen for me. And nothing could be farther from the truth because as you see on Instagram, it will take you less than 30 seconds. It would take me less than 30 seconds to get on there and find somebody playing something that I couldn't play in a million years. So, what does that tell you? To really reach your goals, you really got to know what your goals are in the first place. Do you want to be that guy on Instagram? If so, that is freaking great. More power to you. But to be an actual artist that is intending on creating something to put out there and let the chips fall where they may, people enjoy it, people hate it, whatever it is, this is my art. That's a completely different animal. And the sooner you kind of decide where your goals are, the sooner you can kind of get in the direction of making those things happen for you rather than just believing that developing technique and becoming a versatile instrumentalist is the be all and end all.
So you give me the three tiers there. I would opine that you are in the third tier, the artist tier. But how do you see yourself, Marty? Where do you think you fall on that spectrum?
I don't even really see it as tiers because I don't think one thing is any better than the other. I just think that people need to know that there are different things. And the sooner they realize that, the sooner they can make their way out in the world of music. Um, I've always tried to develop myself as a player, and just doing music forever develops me as a musician. And over the course of releasing my own music for decades, the artist part far takes over all the other things. But for better or for worse, the music that I try to create always demands that I keep my musical chops to their peak. Sometimes I wish I was in the Ramones, three chords and you're done. It's easy. But it's not easy because you have to have an artistic vision and it has to be your own. So it's a wonderful world music is, it really is. So my point is it's not tiers. One thing is not better than the other. I'm inspired by these players all the time. I will see players who do things that I can't do, and as an artist, I'll choose the things that they're doing and take those. I'll say, wow, man, I've never seen somebody do that on guitar. I'm going to learn that. That's an artist decision. A player's decision is, I'm going to learn all that stuff and I'm going to play all that stuff that guy does. But the artist picks and chooses the things that actually appeal to him because that's going to be a part of his music someday.
A couple more for you on this particular topic. When you look at a guitar solo, you've written a lot of them, and you'll probably write a whole lot more of them. What constitutes a good guitar solo? And I suppose, obviously, good being subjective, is there such a thing as a bad guitar solo in your mind?
I don't think there's good and bad music at all. I definitely do not. Every single person has equally valid tastes, and each person has the exact same value. Each person who listens to music has the sole right to enjoy something or not. And it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. If you hear something and you like it, it's good. That's it. That's the end of it. So I can't give you a guideline to what is a good guitar solo or what's not. I remember doing a session, one of my favorite sessions for a singer named Nana Kitade in Japan, and I was playing, my normal stuff, and she told me she's a female singer and really creative singer, and she says, You know what? That's really cool, but I like it when guys sound like they suck." Um, that's interesting, and I relate to that. I relate to that because um, some people. want to hear certain things. And so, like, as the person playing on the session, I'm like, all right, how am I going to do something that's going to make her happy? So, what does she mean by suck? And maybe she means someone who doesn't necessarily have the complete control over the instrument and is just kind of flailing away at something and just going crazy, because that's a very valid thing and people could enjoy listening to that. When I was a kid, I used to love the Dead Boys, and those guitar solos were just off the hook. It just sounded like the guy never picked up a guitar before, but it made me feel so good. So maybe if I could tap into that, and it's not the first time I've heard that from a producer either. Could you kind of like tone down the guitar ability a little bit? Could you tone it down a little bit and just kind of like go ape shit? Don't make it sound like you're a master guitarist. So I kind of tapped into that. And then I got something that she liked and I understood it. And what I did was I just tried to not be as, I'm always subconsciously very, very, very conscious of pitch and playing in pitches that I like to hear. But I tried to play without that filter on. And I think that's what did it. You know, when you play with kind of bad pitch or inaccurate pitch, it can give the illusion that you're just kind of a punk rock guitar player going apeshit when you just picked up your guitar last week. And that's not to disparage punk rock guitar players because there's such a great art in playing really, really good tight punk rock guitar, and I love it. Um, but to answer your question, I don't think there's any good, there's any bad. The solos that turn me on personally are the ones that, like I told you before, come in an unusual place or hit an unusual note on an unusual chord, um, happen on an unusual key modulation, something that I haven't heard before, because as you can imagine, I've heard a lot of guitar solos. So when I hear something that's new, I love it so much and I analyze it and steal it and put it in my own repertoire. And so those are the things that make a good solo for me. Something that who's that group? I heard oh, Moontooth. There's a group called Moontooth out there. Um, and they just had this one song. I don't remember the title, but in the middle, it's like a real brutal metal song. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of it, they're like playing these like Leonard Skinner licks, but they're like upside down. And I'm like, this is the freshest thing I ever heard in this context. So like something like weird and different and that makes the song a better piece of music than it was without it. Those are the things that really turn me on.
To that end, who are a couple new players out there that are keeping solos fresh and seeing to it that they stick around for a long time in a way that's inventive?
It's a good question. There's a lot of great players and um, guys like Ichikanito, and I don't really want to categorize him as like someone who's putting solos in mainstream songs because he's kind of like more of a overall um, he creates these kind of musical landscapes. So the whole thing he's doing is like one big guitar solo. Um, Guys like him and Mateus plays some great solos, what I've heard him playing, but I haven't heard enough of him in other musical contexts that I really can't wait to hear him play in more context because I think he's going to just do some things that blow our minds. There's a lot of super guys out there with who play wonderfully. I think for me as a music fan, what's going to really turn me on the most is when I hear a guitar solo in a pop song context that kind of brings guitar solos more into the mainstream again. In Japan, guitar is a big part of pop music, but I'm talking about the rest of the world. If you look in the top 10, there's rarely guitar solos in there, but something's going to change that. If I had a part in that, I would be thrilled to death. If someone else does that, I'm also going to be very thrilled for it. It's just kind of just a matter of time until there's like some kind of collaboration between dance music and a guitar, rap music and a guitar. Country music has great relations with guitars, but I think it's going to come from the other side, dance music or R&B, hip hop, rap, which is, the top of the charts in most of the world. When a guitar has a big existence in that type of music, the floodgates are going to open and a lot more people are going to be inspired with it.
The last one on this, to your point, if I'm reading your point right, guitar solo is in some ways in a period of transition. We're going to kind of see where it goes. We know where it's been, and it is where it is right now. But once and for all, our guitar solos are they dead? Do you hope the traditional solo dies? Is it on life support? What are your final thoughts on the matter, Marty?
I'm not going to give you any kind of sensational headline in this answer. Um, as you know, as long as people exist, people are going to want to hear music that makes them feel good. So whatever instruments it takes to get there, um, are what the instruments are going to be. And if guitar solos evolve into something that modern people can enjoy, then that's how it's going to be. And I try to do my best in my music. If you listen to my music, they've always evolved. They've always um, played a purpose of trying to make you feel something when you're listening to the entire piece of music. That's all I can do. Um, at the end of the day, it's the listeners who decide whether, a particular instrument is in vogue or not. But for us as guitarists, we all hope that it continues to thrive. It lasted longer than the sax did, and that's a good thing. But I love the sax solos of the 50s, especially the saxes of a guy named Jimmy Wright, who was just this craziest sax player. Um, and he was just like, I don't know, the Eddie Van Halen of sax in the 50s. I don't know how to describe it, but back then sax was the guitar, and now it's still guitar, but it's our responsibility to do things that draw people to want to listen to our instrument. And that's really where I stand on this very, very important topic.
All right, Marty, thanks for running through that with me.